Okay, welcome everybody tonight. We had a bit of a technical problem, which we have now solved. First thing I do is like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Sauk Nation, which we're very grateful for. First order of business is approval of the agenda. This is the ADJOURNMENT, so we only need a motion. We don't need a seconder. So approval of the agenda. Councillor St. Pierre moved. Any discussion? Any changes? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Is Councillor McNabb's not on yet? Correct. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next order is item number 4, reports, climate action plan 4.1. And I think we have Miss Carrisfield to make that presentation. Go ahead, Ms. Carrisfield.
Thank you, Councillor Bettis. Before I begin, I'd like to have this video played for us. Safe and efficient mobility is important for all people in our community. For too long, we've relied on cars to be our default mode of transportation. But what if you could take advantage of remote working environments? What if we enjoyed time with friends on our commute, and that meant less vehicles on Highway 14? The district is looking at how we move and investing in active transportation corridors so that we can safely walk, ride, and roll around town. By rethinking how we move and embracing more sustainable modes of transportation, we can enhance our quality of life. Sauk is striving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. And it will take all of us working together to reach this target. Learn more, including how you can get involved as we synchronize our efforts towards Sauk 2030. So the video that was just played for everyone is the first of 4 Sauk 2030 videos that are in production. This one is already up on the YouTube channel, and I believe there's a second one that will be up shortly if it's not already, which I'll play at the end of the presentation. Before I begin with the rest of the presentation, I would like to take another moment to acknowledge that the District of Sauk is in the unceded traditional territories of the Sauk First Nation and Cheney First Nation. Since time immemorial, the lands comprising the District of Sauk have been inextricably connected to the health, wellness, traditions, languages, and culture of the Sauk and Cheney nations. Their ancestors stewarded these lands and waters with a sense of reciprocity and an eye to future generations that we can only dream of now, given the challenge of settler society-induced climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. As we undertake our work to create a climate action plan for the District of Sauk, it is critical to recognize the immense harms that have occurred and continue to occur in this territory due to colonization. We therefore commit to truth and reconciliation to the best of our ability in Sauk's climate action plan. And I'll begin. 30 years ago, in early June 1992, Canada joined over 150 countries in becoming a member of the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. A couple of weeks later, on June 27th, my mother was taken to Victoria General Hospital, where she had an emergency C-section, and I was born. 14 years ago, in 2008, the District of Sauk signed the BC Climate Action Charter, committing this community to take action to address the increasing impacts of climate change. 14 years ago, in 2008, I turned 16 and was certain I was going to save the world by going fully vegetarian. Today, in 2022, the District of Sauk is considering what it means to intensify our community's commitment to climate action by the adoption of the Climate Action Plan before us today. A couple of weeks ago, on July 27th, 2022, I turned 30 years old and stand proudly knowing that while I'm not fully vegetarian anymore, I can be proud of the work that I'm doing to make a difference. I'm telling you my age to give context to the dates that are discussed in this presentation and in the draft climate action plan. When we hear dates like 2030 or 2050, it is tough to imagine what that will feel like. So much has changed already in the past 30 years since 1992, and so much more is going to happen in the next 30. For me, at least, it's clear that the work within this climate action plan and others like it will encompass most of my working life. By 2050, with the adoption and implementation of the recommended actions within this draft climate action plan and other actions that may come up between now and then, Souk will be a far more resilient community, one in which living here will have a low carbon footprint and carbon emissions will have reached the goal of net zero or better, ensuring that our impact on the environment around us is a positive one, not a degrading one. By then, I will have just turned 58. And hopefully we'll be ready to retire shortly after that. We'll see. During this presentation, I ask you to consider how far we have come since 1992 and how much farther we must go. Where will you or your children or your grandchildren be in 2030, 8 years from now? What about in 2050, 28 years from now? What kind of community will we have created together? So today, I'm introducing the draft Souk 2030 Climate Action Plan for your review and consideration. This report follows up on the Council's strategic priority. Sorry, next slide, I guess. Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry. This report follows up on the Council's strategic priority chart, now action item, last updated on March 28th, 2022, to complete the District of Souk Climate Action Plan. This is a guidance document building on the 7% solution, meant to provide a pathway for Council and staff to meet Council's established target of reducing our emissions by 50% from 2018 levels by 2030 and net zero by 2050. This is a commitment to action with defined action items for the District of Souk to take that are based on best practices, align with existing municipal plans, and promote collaboration with multiple levels of government, community groups, and regional actors. Finally, this is an acknowledgement of the work ahead of us. This plan shows that the District of Souk is prepared to act in partnership to reduce the severity of the impacts of climate change and to increase the presence of low carbon lifestyles within our community. The Souk 2030 Climate Action Plan was developed on the foundation of a narrative change framework. Developed in collaboration with Denise Withers and the Climate Action Committee, and built through community and staff engagement, this framework provides us with our story of change. A narrative change framework places the key stakeholders, in this case, council, staff, and key collaborative actors in the community, as the main characters of the story and addresses the fears and challenges we are facing while envisioning what the future could look like when we achieve our goals. This framework is based on best practices for climate communication and positive psychology. This differs from the traditional doom and gloom messaging that we have heard so much of and has been proven not to work. This framework incites change by meeting people where they are, finding what is important to them, and inviting them into the narrative. This narrative is the basis for the development of the whole climate action plan before you today. The story begins like this. We want to tackle climate change, and we have the imagination and skills to be able to do so, but we are stuck. We just can't seem to build any momentum. Whenever we try to change things, it feels like we're spinning our wheels while things get worse and worse around us. But it doesn't have to be that way. Instead of feeling stuck, we could break free of our old ways of working and rethink the way we do things. Picture a near future where it's easy to shift priorities to focus on what we value most, get creative to discover new possibilities, and empower everyone to create a future-proof Souk we love. The truth is, there's never been a better time for us to build the life we want right here in Souk. There we go. By focusing on 5 key themes, Souk 2030 shows us how we can cut our carbon emissions in half and get more of what we value most. Those 5 rethink themes are how we move, our biggest struggle, how we grow, our opportunity and challenge, how we build, our legacy for the future, how we lead, our values and action, how we relate, our deepest connections. Each of these themes encompass a series of actions that are recommended to help Souk achieve a low carbon resilient community. Throughout the draft plan, district-led high-impact actions have been identified for each theme, for a total of 25 to be included for consideration in the upcoming 5-year financial plan and strategic planning preparations this coming fall. In addition to those 25 actions, dozens more have been recommended in a master list for council and staff to revisit annually. Those 25 priority high-impact actions and the dozens more besides work all together to help in achieving our overall goal of reducing Souk's GHG emissions by 50% from 2018 levels by 2030. These actions will help us create a better community, one in which, oops, sorry, I skipped over. Here we go. One in which more residents can choose to stay within Souk to learn, grow, and play. And when they do travel outside of Souk, most of those trips will be done without the use of fossil fuels. We can also easily walk, bike, roll, or take the bus within our community, simultaneously reducing noise levels, increasing the safety of our streets for our children, and improving our health. Increasing number of personal vehicles are electric, ensuring that car travel doesn't negatively impact our air quality. Our community is quieter, and drivers can save money from reduced fuel and maintenance costs. The wildlife and ecosystems we love so much are protected, with increasing areas of parkland and protected community-owned forests and a healthy Souk basin. Our homes, both new and old, are more efficient and use heating and cooling systems that don't leak methane or burn oil, reducing the risk to our health and lowering our overall energy bills. Our economy is improved, with a focus on more diverse careers within our town. We increasingly recover and reuse construction materials, compost food and garden waste, and prioritize repair of items that we own to extend the lifespan of our belongings. More trees planted, protected, and maintained throughout the town center, ensuring that all those who spend time there benefit from the increased shade, improved water quality, and increased biodiversity, and so much more. Facing the increasing impacts of climate change is overwhelming. It can even feel terrifying. Souk may feel small and unlikely to make a difference in the grand scheme of things. There is a strong temptation to ignore what is happening around us, and frankly, we would love to have someone else handle it. That being said, achieving all of those good things that I've just listed is not going to happen without everyone working together. The good news is that all the actions recommended in this climate action plan help us not only face the impacts of climate change and reduce the risks of increasing danger in the future, but they also have many co-benefits that line the path to a much better future. Using the low carbon resilience framework, this plan presents actions, policies, programs, and proposed bylaws that will enable Souk to achieve its climate targets. These recommendations are presented with the understanding that each action will result in multiple co-benefits, supporting not only environmental needs, but also social and economic ones. This is a plan written for the District of Souk, and it is written in the context of existing municipal plans, upcoming programs, and documents from other levels of government. I'd like to take some time to go over some key items that came up as frequently asked questions during the development of the plan over the last 9 months. So we have some frequently asked questions here for everyone. The first topic is on public engagement. Come on. Here we go. So the public engagement for the climate action plan so far to date has included over 100 interviews with Souk community members. These were done in part with the Climate Action Committee, and we were doing it on the street and community events at different places like gas stations, grocery stores, etc. The idea was to go to places that you wouldn't normally classify as an earth-related or climate-related event, but go everywhere, go in the community. And so we collected all of these stories together in these interviews, and that's what resulted in the story that you heard at the beginning. In addition to that, we also had the Draw Souk 2030 engagement during Earth Week, which resulted in the amazing graphic that I showed a couple of slides ago. We also had the opportunity to spend some time with the EMCS student leadership team, where we asked them the questions around how we rethink, how we move, how we build, how we lead, et cetera, and asked the question of how youth could be more involved in the climate action plan and what they wanted to see of it. In addition to that, public engagement from the past 18 months with the OCP 2022 was included in our considerations with the development of this plan. Still to complete, there is a presentation to the SAUC MOU committee that needs to be completed. And so that will add to the public engagement as well. We also have some information about outreach statistics from SUC 2030, which had a nice big launch during Earth Week. And so I wanted to share with you guys some of those statistics here. You may have seen in the SUC News Mirror a wrap about SUC 2030 in which people could pledge to make a difference for the 7% solution on the back, and you could enter to win an e-bike. This is still an ongoing draw, so the e-bike will be drawn at middle of August, I believe. And so far to date, we have 156 pledges and counting. We also have some statistics around the website where we have over 200 views, and people are actually spending time reading the information. We know this by seeing that the average viewing time was over 2 minutes. Different community events and activities. We have the ideal wall where 33 different ideas were gathered. In addition to the youth idea wall where there was 30 participants that was at EMCS that I mentioned before. A tree planting event in which there were 40 participants, a heat pump webinar in which there were 20 participants. Earth Week Fire Smart had 6 participants plus additional Fire Smart webinars and pop-ups since then. Broom Hill invasive species removal had 25 participants, and the April 23rd Draw at SUC event, there were 60 plus participants. The wish tree at Whiff and Spit also had 70 plus wishes made on oyster shells. You may have seen that on your walks down at Whiff and Spit during Earth Week. Continued from this, we have some more outreach statistics. We have released a couple of different digital editorial stories produced in partnership with Black Press. The data that's listed here is from one of the 2 articles. The other data will be forthcoming. The cover wrap that I showed, that I held up before as well. This was sent to all households and businesses in SUC. The Twitter data from climate action content, as you can see, is quite impressive. In April, we had over 17,000 impressions and 620 engagements. This is climate action content data specifically. And then throughout the recent months, there were slightly lower, but still quite high impressions and engagement for all climate action content. Another question that is that needs to be discussed is what are SUC's emissions doing? So currently we see that community-wide emissions are rising. They rose by 1% from 2018 to 2020. And we may well see a continued rise due to a lag between the decarbonization of our lifestyle while our population continues to increase. This is why it's really important to track emissions from the programs that we're doing to be able to at least have some context for what's working and what's not working. Actions in the draft climate action plan will still avoid additional emissions and help to bend that curve as we start to decarbonize our lifestyle. Additionally to that, it will increase our ability to draw down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, sequestering it. Another question that came up during this process was, what does SUC gain from the CRD Climate Action Service? So as you know, the money that SUC invests in the Climate Action Service allows us to improve our emissions tracking data, freeing up the capacity internally to deliver programs and monitor project level emissions. In addition to that, there's regional programs such as the EV infrastructure improvements, regional home retrofit concierge service, which is coming out in the next few months, from what I understand. Bring It Home for Climate Outreach as well is available and is a really great website. It's free to use, lots of information there. And other programs are identified within Appendix H. Wherever you see the CRD as a collaborator, that indicates that it's part of the Climate Action Service. There's also this information about the Provincial Local Government Climate Action Program. This is a new provincial funding stream that has been committed to for the next 3 years of consistent funding. 3 years is their budget cycle, so they would have to recommit after those 3 years to see if it will be continued after that. SUC is confirmed to receive $135,085 per year for the next 3 years. So that's each year, the same amount. Ongoing corporate emission tracking is a requirement to receive this funding. This essentially replaces the CAREP program that was discontinued. And this funding is quite flexible in what it can be used for. It can be used to leverage grant opportunities, deliver programs, engage contractors for studies, training, boosting capacity, etc. It may be, you may also be wondering what are the top climate risks in SUC. So there is an adaptation section in one of the appendices of the Climate Action Plan. And overall, the top climate risk in SUC is wildfire. In addition to this, we also have increasing drought and water shortage, flooding, and increased storm severity. These are not only risks that can likely impact our infrastructure, but also have severe impacts to our community's health. Adaptation measures have been identified and included in the SUC 2030 Climate Action Plan. So I previously mentioned that there were 25 high impact items that were identified. And these were identified particularly because they are district led. So although there are other short-term high priority items that are included, if they are led by a different government body, they have not been identified in this short list. And so it's important to acknowledge that there are two different streams there. In addition to that, they can be completed in the next 5 years, or they may require continuous implementation over a longer period of time, starting as soon as possible. So these are ones that, like, ideally should be started right away. In addition to that, they will also result in emissions reduction or mitigation, and/or they can set the groundwork for future actions, as there are some actions that have been identified that may not be possible without first doing these. I also mentioned a master list of additional actions. It's quite extensive. And the reason for all of these items in this master list is because we did a literature review of different municipal plans and documents from other entities, other levels of government, other municipal plans, and then also taking a look at SUC's municipal plans of various kinds, like the Transportation Master Plan, Parks and Trails Master Plan, etc. In addition to those, we also identified best practices that were recommended from the climate policy and climate science experts. And the inclusion of the actions that are planned or underway in different jurisdictions that will impact SUC, that are something we need to take account of, are also included. So this plan is meant to be used as a living document. And therefore it's recommended that council and staff use the plan to develop financial and strategic plans similar to the TMP and PTMP. That's the Transportation Master Plan and Parks and Trails Master Plan. Revising the plan on an annual basis to include new actions, prioritize resources, and provide accountability is essential to the success of the implementation of this plan. And funding sources for most of the actions identified in this plan include provincial and federal grants using the provincial LGCAP and existing climate action budget as leveraging funds. Other funding opportunities may be identified for specific programs. Finally, how will the District of SUC track emissions? So actions and projects within this climate action plan can have annual emissions tracking per the Greenhouse Gas Global Protocol for project-based emissions. This is effective because it can help us understand which projects are actually reducing emissions or avoiding emissions that would have otherwise existed. And then in addition to that, we should include continued partnership with the CRD to improve biannual regional emissions report. And there's also potential for council to advocate for annual reporting. Annual corporate emissions reporting is also required by the local government climate action program with the province. So this slide here is a suggested timeline that could be expected after today. So something that's not on here is just mentioning the presentation to the South County Committee as well. That would likely happen in the next couple of months. In addition to that, we are currently in July, so we're reviewing the plan. The idea would then be, depending on council's decision, to endorse the plan in September, where council would receive the plan to endorse in principle. Staff would then be directed to include that plan in financial and strategic planning processes in the fall. Completing that step in September would complete the Partners for Climate Protection milestone 3. After that, there would be several months of creating an implementation plan alongside the budget. So this follows with standard district procedures. And so likely in January, maybe a bit earlier, maybe a bit later, there would be, council would receive an implementation plan alongside the budget information for that year. This implementation plan would complete the PCP milestone 4. Immediately after that, once that budget and implementation plan have been approved by council, there would be ongoing implementation. And this could take obviously as long as it takes, but just an ongoing idea that each action item could be brought forward to council for deliberation as needed. I also put on there the last item in around June or July next year, the 2022 emissions data for the Partners of Climate Protection could be submitted because that's likely when that information will be released by the CRD. And that will successfully complete PCP milestone 5, after which ongoing emissions tracking is voluntary. So just to summarize, the work in this plan is a lot, but it's not a sacrifice. It's not a punishment. However, it is hard work. SUC 2030 is an invitation to rethink the ways that we're doing things in our community, in which we currently move, grow, build, lead, relate, and reveal better ways of doing things to improve SUC. This work will mean that by the time we are all done, by 2050, by the time I turned 58 years old and I'm ready to retire, I hope, SUC and the world around us will be in a better place than it is today. So by endorsing the SUC 2030 Climate Action Plan in principle, the District of SUC would commit to the path forward to achieve our climate action targets. The combination of the recommended actions in this document will help SUC begin to achieve these goals. An ongoing measurement and performance analysis will ensure that any gaps and additional requirements are identified and included in future iterations of this plan. So before we wrap up, I have one more video to show you. Hopefully it works.
What if home was more comfortable? You could enjoy consistent heat in the winter and efficient cooling in the summer. SUC is striving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030, and it will take all of us working together to reach this target. From policy implementation, such as the BC Energy Step Code, to home upgrades that can save you money, there is something each of us can do to make a difference. Draft-proofing your home can reduce energy consumption between 5 to 30%. Insulating windows by hanging heavy curtains or applying an insulation film can keep the cold out and the cozy in the winter and cool in and the warm out in the summer. You might also consider a heat pump to regulate your home temperature year-round. There are various rebates available to help you with the purchase and installation. Learn more, including how you can get involved as we synchronize our efforts towards SUC 2030.
And so with that, I have the proposed recommendation today on the screen that the committee recommend to council to receive the draft SUC 2030 Climate Action Plan for endorsement in principle, and to direct administration to include the recommendations in this plan for consideration in the 5-year financial plan with the goal of aligning it with the present and future needs of the District of SUC. Thank you for your time today, and I'm prepared to answer questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Carrisfeld. A lot in that report, I must say. A lot of work went into it, and I'm very impressed the amount of material that I had to go through this weekend. So you made me work for a change, so no, that's good. I'm now going to go to just a clarification from Ms. Machada. Do I go to the public for comments?
Yes, that's correct. And I just wanted to let you know that Councillor McMath did join during the presentation, so she's online now.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, it did say it on my form here, so I'm going to now go to the public, correct? Okay, thank you very much. But thank you for that presentation. It was very easy to listen to. And again, very impressed with the report. Thank you. Now we'll go to the public. If you wish to come up, you have 2 minutes. You need to identify yourself and the area where you live.
Ellen Lewis, and 2 minutes is hardly enough to deal with all this. First of all, I'm not so sure that carbon's an issue. We have, listening to all this, we have trees and water that absorb carbon. They draw down CO2 from the atmosphere. Well, that's what the trees in the ocean do. I don't know if any of the council members have watched the video that I sent you, Kiss the Ground. I sent you that information. It's very important to watch that because it's the green that absorbs the carbon dioxide. The cost of this is just horrendous. There wasn't any consultation with farmers, homeowners, builders, businesses. Why? Why? Because I think farmers are already doing the best practices. Support green building strategies that save money while reducing emissions. Oh, there's so much to go through here. Okay, tracking emissions. How in the world are we tracking emissions? That's my question. And where do they go? If we're tracking them, how do we track them? Then where do they go when they're emitted? You know, I believe they go to the trees and the water, but it's interesting. Hold on, there's too many things. Supporting new building codes, pursuing low carbon energy sources. I see in here also in the building, it says moving to electricity, getting rid of natural gas. Souk is still working on bringing natural gas in. So now we're getting rid of natural gas. What's the cost of this? Do we not have more important things? Is what I'm saying. I don't think we're in a climate emergency. I don't think we're in an issue here that we're in a climate emergency in here because it's too flipping hot because the windows don't open. But there's no climate emergency outside. And if we just plant more trees and if you watch Kiss the Ground, you'll see what happens is when the ground is tilled, the carbon goes up. Then when the ground is seeded and the greenery comes up, the carbon levels, it goes around the earth. And I don't know how you're going to reduce 50% of what I find out from staff that we, in the Capital Regional District, we have 0.006 emissions. So reducing that by 50%, is that going to change the world? Do we not have other things to do that are more important? Let's take focus on, there's so many things here. It really bugs me when I see the settler colonialism in here yet again. We had that in our OCP and I see this stuff coming up. It's like the colonials are at fault for everything, whoever they are. And instead of propping up old systems and habits that do more harm, we should shift our culture and practices to create a community that reflects our values. Well, what are our values? How do we shift that? What is that plan? Instead of continuing the harm caused by economic and social systems that privilege some over others, we could invest in creating a just, healthy future for all. What does that mean? I mean, the whole thing is so full of so many unbelievable things. To prevent worsening climate impacts, the federal government of Canada has made commitments to reduce emissions 40 to 45% for 2005 to 2030 and committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Well, how do we know if we've achieved net zero? What's the measure? And then there's issues in here about farming, how to reduce emissions with farming. Well, if anybody's watching what's happened in Holland, reducing emissions, Holland and Italy and Germany, and you see what's happening around the world, you know, getting rid of 30% emissions on farms. Does that mean you take on your plate, you take 30% of your food and check it out? Because now you're going to, if the farmers are producing 30% less, that means it's 30% less on your plate. And their urban containment and less sprawl. It's interesting because I talked to my grandson about this because when they're driving down East Duke Road and there's all, sorry, I just wanted, if I could just finish this.
I'll give you a
Okay,
few
I
seconds.
just
Wait.
driving down any road. You're driving down any road and there's driveways coming off of every road. Every,
Okay, I think
okay,
that's-
so they're all there.
Thank
That's
you,
urban
Ms.
sprawl.
Lewis.
Okay,
We had your 5
I'll have to come
minutes.
back because there's lots. to say.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go through everybody else first.
Okay.
I just have one question for Ms. Carisfield. Were farmers consulted in this?
To my knowledge, during the interviews, it was any of the community members. So they were not asked what their jobs
Alright, so they
were.
weren't identified.
They weren't
as a group.
identified as
Okay,
a specific target group. No,
okay, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
We have anybody else now, please?
Alan Dolan, Suk. I'll be brief. I totally support this plan. A lot of hard work, a lot of good people involved. It's really important stuff. We need to implement it and budget it and make it happen. And the best way to make that happen is to hire a full-time climate action coordinator. I think as many may know, Maya's leaving Suk, and she's our loss. I think if we'd been a little faster on our feet, we might have Maya as our climate action coordinator to implement this stuff, because she's been a fantastic asset to this process. There is a climate emergency. If you're listening to the news, you know, look what's the temperatures in England and the fires in Spain, and look at the heat dome that was here. Look at the fires in BC. Look, it's everywhere. There is a climate emergency, and we're not moving fast enough for it. But this is a start. This is important, and this needs to be funded and supported by council.
Thank you for that. Mr. Dolan. Anybody else wish to come up and make a presentation?
Good evening, Elizabeth Lang, Suk, and I'm a member of the Climate Action Committee that has worked on this this year. My grandparents came to Canada in the early 1900s, seeking freedom from war, freedom of religion, and the gift of owning land. They were self-sufficient, needing money only for what they could not produce: tea, coffee, sugar, and some cloth. My dad was the horse whisperer, keeping them all pulling the plows and wagons. My family took pride in becoming mechanized, purchasing the first modern tractor in the area with rubber tires. The neighbors scoffed, "Well, that's never gonna work out." My dad talks about bird migrations so large that the sky darkened, the abundance of fish, berries, and game, often trading with the local Cree. Each child in the family had a role in helping the family prosper among a community that helped each other. They all remember these days with immense happiness. My auntie now describes what has been lost as she continues on the family farm, trying to protect the bees who pollinate her orchard from ditch spraying. Her cousin moved a couple of loads of cropland soil onto his garden. The seedlings shriveled. When tested, the soil was so riddled with chemical, it was essentially dead. My family now knows that our choices have been harming the living world, especially fossil fuels and chemicals. So for me, and the education after 3 generations that they were able to provide me, sustainability is really taking the high quality of life that my grandparents lived, slower, much happier, and melding it with renewable energy technologies, practices like a circular economy where again, nothing is wasted, and a culture that really values our relations with the living world. Now, even in the US, I've just read recently, military leaders, Republicans, evangelical Christians now realize that the climate emergency is here. And they are saying this threatens our freedom. It threatens our security, our property, our economy, and our health. If we want to protect our way of life and honor our ancestors, that we must undergo another technology change and make our community self-sufficient again, maintaining a safe and comfortable life for all. This is what this climate action plan does. It puts the 7% solution into action and helps make a transition to an even better way of living. The plan is flexible as changing realities occur and what the council's priorities are each year. So this can be your legacy, joining the thousands of cities and towns around the world who are committed to this international goal. I'd like to really take this last time to thank Maya and all of the staff. I know all of you have worked on this plan in your own way, and they've done a tremendous amount of work. And I really applaud. This is well researched. It's based on some of the latest climate science, and Maya has been trained in that. So what she was able to produce in this report went far beyond many of our skills. So again, I'm just really grateful for that. And I'd like to thank the council as well for working with us and inspiring us in all sorts of conversations, and also for your guidance and the decisions that you've been making. So I hope that you will endorse the plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Anybody else wish to come up? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Belford and I live in Souk. Souk signed on to the Climate Action Charter in 2008 and declared a climate emergency in 2018. I think it's time now that we join Colwood, Saanich, Esquimalt, Victoria, and other municipalities across the province and the country, and the world really, in taking action to address our role that the community plays in climate change. Adoption of this climate action plan is going to set Souk on a predictable path to reduce our GHG emissions, protect our homes and neighborhoods from floods, wildfire, and other climate-related hazards, and improve all community members' quality of life. That means that this plan sets us on a path to reduce the 57,000 metric tons of GHGs that we currently produce to 28,500 tons by 2030 and 0 to 2050. The plan is very clear about how this progress will be measured. I don't have time to go into it here. The Climate Action Plan beautifully summarizes the way that our decisions impact the natural world around us. It grows logically out of and fits with Souk's other established master plans, including the draft OCP. Referencing the LCR model used by Souk and other municipalities, this plan's approach focuses on what can be done in all aspects of Souk's community life, in our transportation, our agriculture, our development, our construction, our governments, and our social systems. And it presents practical actions to do for the 2023 to 2027 financial process. It's true that following this plan will change some of the ways we do things, and some people may be impacted negatively. And to that extent, it's going to be important for the district to find suitable supports and incentives to address such situations going forward. This plan is well researched and documented. Its recommended actions are clear, detailed, and practical. This document illustrates and responds to the interconnectedness of seemingly unrelated issues like mental health and climate change, and shows that there is a relationship. It's this kind of interconnected thinking that we need to guide us over coming decades. So let's adopt and embrace this plan and join the many communities around the globe who are striving to protect the climate that we all need to survive. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Belford. Is there anybody else wish to make a statement?
Oh, I'm sorry. I usually speak so loud, I don't, yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'd just like to make 3 points. One is underlying all of this is a question of values and people's values. And I think it's a challenge to take a look and to help people look at their values, because they need to take the benefits of the common good of our community and our world above the private interest of how they think they want to live. The second thing I'd like to mention is that the challenge, I think, one of the challenges is to look in terms of the community itself, in terms of the assembly, in terms of this organization, the council and the operation of this business, is to look at it holistically and think of the way that, for example, giving incentives for people that are building affordable homes, looking at the way that you charge fees and require, for example, energy audits, environmental audits, professional engineers to do various aspects of building costs, increase the cost significantly. And if those monies could be spent instead on incentives to introduce, for example, environmental improvements to buildings, for example, water sequestration, storing the water from storm service, from the storms, rather than just have a storms drainage program, but actually have water that you can then use to water the trees and keep the plants alive. So I think there's a need to look at that far more holistically in terms of the way that the community or the council looks at its incentives rather than looking at costs and controls. And thirdly, I'd like to mention that when I look at this implementation plan, and as a consultant, I've worked on many of these kinds of studies, the implementation plan often takes longer than the problem they're trying to solve. And if you look at that timeline and what's going to go on and the effort that's required before an actual real action happens, it gives me a lot of concern, because what happens is the whole process can get lost in the bureaucracy. And what I suggest is taking some items, and there's a lot of things that you can do tomorrow without waiting for this huge plan to be implemented, that you can look at incremental things that contribute to this plan that you will eventually adopt. But there's things that you can happen and do right now. My concern is that when you create these mammoth plans, and it is a huge plan, it's very well thought out, but to get through it and to actually do something, I think you can start doing things tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Hello, my name is Steve Anderson, 6788 Blanchard Road, just around the corner here. A million things I could say, but the one thing that keeps coming to my mind, and I'm sure the council knows this, as far as how much these plans will actually impact the individual people of Sioux. I'm picturing 2031, someone with a gas guzzling pickup truck or a stinky diesel burning home fuel source getting under pressure. My brain goes to the poor man who wants to help out, but can't help out. You know, they do what they can. We all care about the environment, what's going on, pollution and the climate change and all that. I'm trusting this council and the future councils as well. Just always keep in mind the poor man. Whoever can't afford that new furnace or can't afford solar panels, or which will be very common, can't afford $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 electric cars. This is Sioux. There is a lot of people who go by day to day, paycheck to paycheck. I can picture 2031, a single mother living in a mobile home, little wood burning stove. That's all she has. She goes out and picks up her little bits of wood to keep her family warm during the winters. So I trust that this council and the future council will keep that in mind as far as, you know, how this all plays out. Last thing I'll say is this brings to mind, and I can't say exactly when, but it's about 20 or 25-ish years ago when the whole radio system changed and went digital. But with cable TV, it was going to go digital as well. And basically, you know, if you had one of those big old TV sets, you know, when you you'll fine tune the old reception or turn your rabbit ears, whatever, those were going to be moot, no good for anything. There is a group of some sort, and forgive me, I can't remember the name of them, but they did stand up for those poor people who couldn't buy the digital box or get a fancy new TV, you know, it's just out of their budget. And they actually put off laws saying that everyone has to go digital. They stopped the whole digitalization of cable TV as we know it. So that just comes to mind when I think about this. Same thing, you know, 5, 10, 15 years from now, not everyone can afford to join the whole action plan, which, you know, we all want to save the earth. We want to keep things nice and clean for ourselves and future generations, but not everyone can afford it. So as long as the council and future councils remember that, I'm happy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any others from the public that would like to say something?
Good evening, Ernest Klassen, Souk. I know you're all tired of hearing from me. Souk has various elements dedicated to accessibility in town. Curb cuts, ramps, elevators. Councillor Jeunesse, do you find those valuable to you?
I do.
You do? You see, I find them valuable to me too. They make my life easier. The same thing with many of these, with this plan is each of these things will make all of our lives better, easier, more enjoyable in some or many ways. It's exactly the same as cutting a curb at a corner to make it easier for people to walk up it. Everybody benefits from that. Well, everybody can benefit from this. We stressed incentives to help those who find expenses to be an issue. This whole plan just serves all of us to make our lives better, more local, more enjoyable, more neighborly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klassen. Is there anybody else like to come up? Can't hear you.
There you go. Thank you. I'm currently living in, my name is Corinne Bourdieu. I'm currently living in Langford and soon to be moving in Souk, which is why I'm here today and wanting to know what is going on in this lovely community that we have. Let me start by saying that obviously there was quite a bit of research done on this. What I find interesting is, and I think council should know about this, is that there is a 400-year climate change curve cycle that exists. There's a lot of research that actually has been done around this by looking at ice caps and into the Arctic and Antarctica, and I'm more than happy to provide that kind of research to you. But what I want to be clear is sometimes we look at a particular cycle and we look at just one part of it and it looks like there's big change when in fact, maybe if you see the entire big picture, it doesn't look like there's change. So I think there's maybe a little more additional research that needs to be done before agreeing on this particular proposal. The other thing that I think is important to mention is that I have watched the movie Kiss the Ground, which is a magical movie, and I definitely invite you to go in and watch it. The last time I looked, it was on Netflix. Most people have Netflix, so feel free to go and check it out. It does discuss the importance of CO2, interestingly enough, as the food for our rainforests. So I know you've seen a lot of rain this past spring and summer, and it may seem like it's a horrible thing, maybe in the picture, because we all want our summer. But if you looked around, our greenery is very green and our rainforest is absolutely loving it. And I'm interested in knowing if there was any research to see, particularly if we are reducing our emission, whether that would actually impact the rainforest. So the opposite of what we've been talking about, interestingly enough, because it is the food of all the plants. The other thing that I think is interesting to talk about is logging. So if we are really interested in reducing emission, one of the things that we know is if CO2 is the food of plants, wouldn't that make sense to look at logging and clear cutting? One of the things that we maybe would want to look at instead of spending all this money on this lovely plan is to maybe asking companies to reforest their clear cuts. And that used to happen all the time. I remember there was lots of students that used to spend their summer replanting trees. Don't know why that's not happening anymore, but I think it's worth looking into because we know that the trees will absorb all of those emissions that we're also worried about. The other thing that I think is really important to talk about is resilience. We've had a number of time where people have talked about resilience and Sooke being resilient. I think that we need to look at what resilience actually means. So for example, we know for better or for worse that sometimes we lose electricity. So if we tell people that they can't have fireplace anymore and they can't use propane and they can't use fuel, what happened when hydro is down? Does that leave them completely unable to take care of themselves? And I think this is really important because we need to consider that part. And potentially we're leaving people completely vulnerable in those moments. And we're assuming that, you know, again, I think it was Steve that mentioned, not everybody's going to have the ability to go and get themselves power solar panel to be able to support themselves in those moments to make sure that they're heated and have warmth and able to feed themselves in those particular situations. The other thing that I think is important is someone mentioned migration of birds. And am I ever going to pretend that we have no pollution? No, I do think we have pollution. Do we think that the emission is the problem? I don't think it's the problem. For example, migration of birds. If we feed the birds, they're not going to migrate. So are you going to have the same migration that you used to have? No. But that's something that maybe we need to educate the public about because it is impacting those migration. As for the bees, people are using pesticide. Is it impacting them? Absolutely. Is that a horrible? Yes. So let's look at pesticide. Why do we have to use this entire huge project that's going to cost a silly amount of money, that's going to impact people's ability to do any kind of renovation on their homes? And the idea seems really good, but I think the practicality of it and what the impact will be on our community is more fulsome. And I think that if you walk on the street right now and you ask someone, so would you be okay with losing your fireplace? I would be concerned if I was council and I would want to be reelected.
Your 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Oh, and I have just one last thing.
No, we're done. Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, I don't see. Just a second, I'm going to ask for clarification because I'm sort of new at this.
A motion of council is required to extend the time limit.
What's council's wish? Do you wish to give Ms. Lewis another time or you've had enough? Do you make that into a motion, please? Just make that motion again, please.
Sorry, I'll move that we give Ms. Lewis another 2 minutes.
Okay, we don't need a seconder for that, so I'll call the question. All those in favor, raise their hand. 1, 2, 3. All those against, raise their hand. And that's 1. So that is passed. So Ms. Lewis, you have another 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor McMath. I don't have a picture of you, so I can't see you. How did you vote?
That's okay. I wanted it to go to the first two, or I wanted it to go to the floor to discuss because I wanted to also extend it to our last speaker as well.
We'll new to this, so I think that you want to amend your motion to include giving other speakers another 2 minutes, but that could be dangerous grounds too. But if we do it to one, I suspect we should do it to all. Yeah, okay,
Sure,
we do,
another 2 minutes.
okay. And I'm going to call a vote again for that, please. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. McMath, how are you doing that?
In favor.
And how many against, please? 1 against. Thank you. So we're going to give another 2 minutes for anybody that was
Thank you.
before.
As a committee of the whole, I would hope we could all speak if you want to hear what the community thinks. Building energy, encouraging deep retrofits of existing buildings to replace fossil fuel with electricity using heat pump technology. And as was mentioned just before, came up with power outages. I don't know how we'd manage if we were all on heat pumps. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the last power outage was 10 hours. And if I didn't have a gas generator, my house would have flooded. So yeah, it's just not a possible thing. You did pass in the last bylaws, unfortunately, that septic tanks were illegal, but if we're talking about once they need to be decommissioned or smashed in. But an excellent place for water storage. And there's so many different things that we can be doing in a positive way. Plant trees. I've said that when I was on the Fisher Community Plan, the last 3 plans I was on, is that we should be planting trees and giving incentives for people to plant trees on main thoroughfares and give farm status or something like that. Give incentives rather than take away and say that you can't do these things. I was born and raised, as this lady was talking about, I was born and raised on a farm without electricity and running water, and my ancestors too came here in 1900s. And if anyone would like to come and visit my farm, you're welcome to, because it is pretty self-sustainable, and I think I'm doing things pretty much the way they should be done. So I'm not against I mean, I approve of taking care of the climate, but I think that this is all the wrong way, most of it the wrong way. I think we have to look at this in a better way, and I don't think the council should be putting it through as another cost on people, because then it also costs because of the cost to people also means they have to.
Okay, Ms.
work
Lewis, thank
more.
you very much.
Thank you.
Your further 2 minutes is up. Now, did anybody else want to have a second go at that? Come on up. Restate your name again, please.
Thank you. It's Corinne Bordieu. Again, I live in Langford and soon to be moving to Souk. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak again. I was going to add one single thing, which is likely not going to take 2 minutes, just for you to know that not a single prediction that the science, quote unquote, made since the 70s about climate change has come to pass. So I just wanted to leave that with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another opportunity, 2 more minutes. There you go.
Thank you I won't even take 2 minutes.
With the name again, please.
Alan Dolan, Souk.
Thanks.
There is a climate emergency, and we've declared it here, and it's been declared all over the world. 99% of the scientists know it. It's true. It's there. I don't think that this council, or this community, is going to do anything to anybody that hurts them or makes it difficult for them. And I think there's an embedded thing in the plan that says that it's inclusive, and all these programs and plans, and for instance, Saanich has put a plan together where in fact the biggest incentives are for people who have the least amount of money. So, this can be done, but we have to believe it needs to be done, and we don't need climate deniers to tell us that there's no climate emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Anybody else for the further 2 minutes?
I just have
State your name again, please. for the
Susan
record.
Belford. I live in Sassinos in Souk. First of all, I'm not a single mother, but I am a person who lives on a fixed income in a trailer, and I don't have a heat pump. But I really am excited. I was really excited when I read the plan to see that there was it was suggested that Souk move ahead with a property assessed clean energy program, which allows me to borrow money from the municipality to pay for the installation of a heat pump, and I pay that off with my property taxes. When I sell my house, I get to support affordable housing by selling at a reduced price, incorporating the cost of the heat pump going forward. The new owner can either pay the heat pump off fully or continue doing as I will be doing by paying it through my taxes. There are all kinds of ways of supporting us, all of us, individual residents, elderly people, homeless people, property developers. In this plan, there are all kinds of ways to support all of us to ensure we can move forward with attacking climate change and building our community to be more resilient in the face of climate change, which definitely does exist, as I think the people in Europe are experiencing right now. Thanks so much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Any other takers for the extra 2 minutes? Okay, thank you everybody for the many submissions. It was interesting hearing them from actually 2 different sides. So now I would like to go to council to see if they have any questions for our Ms. Carisfeld, make it right. And so I will open it up to councillors to ask questions of our presenter. Councillor Bateman.
Sure, I'll jump in here. As council's liaison with the Climate Action Committee, I'm pretty familiar with this process, but I'll just ask a few questions of Ms. Carisfeld. So in assembling the 25 immediate high impact actions for the next 5-year period, what was the process by which you assembled those 25?
The 25 that were assembled, as mentioned in my presentation, were that they were primarily district-led. So these were things that Souk could do that other governments were not already going to be doing. In addition to that, they will have an impact on emissions in our community, either by avoiding emissions that may happen in the future or reducing them directly. Some of them are also capacity building actions. And so they enable future actions to happen that are included in the master list, but wouldn't be possible without some lead time. And those are the actions that were included in the 25. Yeah.
So when you say district led, no other governments are involved in these, but however, these are, with the rare exception like the farm hamlet template.
Yes.
Most of these are in fact happening elsewhere, and district staff will be able to learn and take best practice advice from these other examples.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. There are examples of these actions happening in other municipalities. By saying district led, it's just that Souk would be doing it on our own or working with others and engaging others to help us do it. But there are examples of many of them.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Is there anybody else from council? Councillor Logan.
Thank you very much for the report to you and the Climate Action Committee. I know a lot of work has been put into this. Souk has declared a climate emergency, so it's nice to see actions taking place already and also tons of planned actions going ahead. One thing I wanted to ask right away, the full plan with all of the actions obviously is a lot. It would take 20.5 FTEs to accomplish, so it's not achievable unless someone drops $1 billion from the sky. So maybe it is. For the 25 actions, the immediate actions, do you know the approximate FTEs required to accomplish those?
I do not know the approximate FTEs required to accomplish each of the individual 25 actions. No, they were included kind of as a department basis. So you'll find those same 25 actions included in the master list. And so they can be broken out from there. None of the actions to my memory require a full FTE on their own. However, they would be likely incorporated in existing or part of a future FTE.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other counselor, any questions? Counselor St. Pierre?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. One of them is actually the metric that we're using, which is the 2005 emissions of 57,000 tons or so on and so forth. And obviously we know that the community is growing. We know that those metrics are kind of messy because the community is growing. It's very difficult to actually balance that out. I was curious as to whether or not we considered some sort of a per capita with a net zero at the end. So for example, the net zero really doesn't change because net zero is net zero. But I would consider it a significant win if our population increased by 25%. Meanwhile, our emissions stayed stable for the next 5 or 10 years. I would say we're actually reducing our emissions significantly and we're on our way to net zero. So are we actually able to consider that at all? And have we thought about how to do that? Because otherwise it's gonna look really bad because our community is going to keep on growing by leaps and bounds from the looks of things.
That's a great question. Thank you. Per capita is definitely a metric that is of interest in terms of the whole story. It does provide some information. The struggle with using per capita emissions as the sole metric for this is that it could potentially cloud ongoing emissions increases. So in addition to tracking emissions increases and decreases overall, we can look at that per capita to get information on how each individual person in our community could be technically assigned, so to speak, those emissions. However, as you've said, with the growing population, if our emissions were to, if we were to say that per capita emissions were to drastically decrease because our population is increasing, that's more to do with more people in the pot taking smaller pieces of pie than there is actually a decrease in emissions. So it's part of it. It's an interesting metric to pay attention to, and it's certainly part of the story that can help us understand what's going on. But I would advise not using it as a sole metric.
My follow-up question has to do with external GHGs. So the metrics that we're using right now strictly measure, honestly, just a few data points within the district, within our geographic boundaries, but doesn't actually take into account, honestly, the fact that most of us are massive consumers. So we've been trained that way and we consume a hell of a lot. And most of that comes up from elsewhere. So for example, I noticed that our livestock is minuscule, but meanwhile, most of us eat a hell of a lot of meat, which means that somewhere else there's huge amounts of emissions happening because of that meat, but we're not really measuring that. I noticed in the appendices that it was covered, there were some statistics around it, but again, this doesn't cover any of our other consumption, and I didn't actually notice anything in particular towards that. I mean, there's some talk about cultural shift, and certainly if you're looking at cultural shift, there could be more awareness, but is there, I don't think the plan necessarily covers that. Is that just because it shouldn't be covered? I'm not sure. Just want to.
That's a great question. You've touched on one of the struggles with carbon accounting in general, is that depending on which set of metrics you decide to go for, you might be focusing on consumption-based metrics, which is what you're describing, or you might be focusing on production-based metrics, which is emissions and producing of emissions from cars, for example. The set of emission metrics that are being used for our community-wide report is production-based. So it does not focus on those consumption emissions. You're correct in that. It's not that it's not valuable to pay attention to those emissions. It's just that based on the things that the District of Sooke has the ability to impact and to make changes on, the consumption-based metrics are I would argue, a small lever that we actually have control over as a District of Sooke. As individuals, we have a lot of capacity there to make individual changes and to communicate with those in our community on how they can make those changes. And certainly we can advocate and lobby with different groups and how things are produced. However, given that there's on the whole very little manufacturing, very little creation of products on the whole in Sooke, although there is some, it's not a massive chunk of what we do. It's within the District of Sauk's interest to focus in on these larger levers, like focusing on transportation policies and building policies, land use policies, et cetera, within this plan. That being said, there is a list of recommended actions that individuals could partake in one of the appendices as a starting list for different rethink areas, which if an individual were to read this plan, they could take that as a starting point to start asking those questions of themselves and to focus on their consumption habits as well.
I can continue, but I'll give someone else a chance, or?
I'm going to ask any councillors, then I'll come back to Councillor St. Pierre. Anybody else would like to say something? Councillor Bateman.
So round two. Tell me, in this plan, is anyone who has a wood burning fireplace in Sauk in danger of losing that wood burning fireplace as a result of this plan?
No.
No. Okay, that's good to know. In terms of natural gas, anyone with a current natural gas Fortis account, are they in danger of losing their certs?
No.
No. Okay, so that's strictly for new hookups is the recommendation. Okay. In terms of the climate equity piece here, could you go into a little detail? Mr. Anderson spoke of people who will may be impacted through this plan.
Well, certainly. One of the really important aspects of development of this climate action plan was considering climate equity, climate justice. As such, there is an appendix that includes a framework for climate justice for all of the actions within the plan to kind of be asked a series of questions and to have a climate justice kind of workshop around it in the development of those actions. So given that each of these actions would have to be implemented, there is still opportunity for staff and council to, and the community and as part of additional community input, to take a look at how each of these actions would be programmed and how they would be created. And climate justice is a key component of that. What are the questions we need to ask to make sure that a program doesn't negatively impact one group over another? What are the things that we need to put in place in order to ensure that the financials of a program iron out some of the inequalities that we see in our community? These are things that are included as that framework so that it can be referred to on a regular basis for each and every action as it comes up to council.
Okay, carry on a little bit, if you don't mind.
Just excuse me, Councillor Bateman, but I neglected Councillor McMath.
Oh, okay,
And,
yes, let's
as
go.
the first
If I
time.
can come back again. Thank you.
So I'll let you finish, but I'm going to come to Councillor McMath. Did you have any comments, Councillor McMath, or question?
I do.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
Sorry, last time I tried to turn my video on, it kicked me off. I'll try again. Hi. I have a couple questions through the chair to either staff or the presenter. What is the full cost of the implementation of this plan?
Through your worship.
Sorry, if someone's speaking, I can't hear them.
Just
a minute, Councillor McMath. We're just doing a special
Microphone
book
swap.
up just for you.
Okay.
Thank you. As stated in the plan, the full costing hasn't been completed yet. So part of the idea, as you can see, it's a very fulsome plan. So what, the next step is to confirm this is the plan council would like staff to implement. And then if this is the options and recommendations that council supports for the climate action plan, then staff will take that away and cost that out as part of the 2023 to 2027 5-year financial plan development and bring those options back to council with potential implementation and costing for council consideration. Some items may not be achievable in the short term as desired in the plan due to cost restrictions, but at the end of the day, that'll be council's decision to make, and full costing will be known with the 2023 budget development.
So in the presentation, there are symbols, and then later on there's a legend. And so they're reflected with silhouettes of half a person, a full person, a single dollar up to 4. And they have dollar amounts associated with them. so we have some sort of idea or we have no idea?
The legend that you see through chair to Councilor McMath, the legend that you see included in that section is a very high level indication of the range that you might expect from each action. It's not meant as a budgeting exercise, rather an indication that each action would have its own considerations to make when it regards to budget considerations. So a $4 sign amount is likely to have a cost over $1 million. These ranges were decided based on best practices as seen in other municipal plans such as Port Moody. However, they can be adjusted obviously with future iterations of this plan, and they will necessarily be so through the budget creation in the fall.
And so, and I'll just preface this with and I think I would speak for a large group of people, is it's not that anyone is lacking in like the moral character or isn't willing to make small sacrifices or lifestyle changes. But one of the challenges that I have with this piece is that it's kind of the cart before the horse. So to approve a plan with no budget assigned to it, to me is sort of backwards. I would much prefer that we have a budget with plan A, B, C, D, E, and then we look at what the community of Sooke can afford. Because if I do a breakdown of 21 staff at say $100,000 a pop, that's $2.1 million. And I think our 1% tax increase is about $93,000. And so that is 22.58% tax increase for the staffing alone. If I tally the dollar symbols, and I know they're just estimates.
Just a second. Councilor McMath, is this in the form of a question, or I mean, are you?
Well, my question, I'll get there. I'll talk faster. So basically, if I just do a rough estimate myself on a high level overview, it's just over $4.5 million. And so I just right now, I can't justify approving or endorsing a plan yet. It's not that I'm not supportive of it, and not that I'm not supportive of having steps to it, but where is the money coming from for this plan?
Discuss that when the motions come forward. So
my question is, where is the money coming from for this plan?
And our CAO had his hand up, so I'm gonna let him speak first before that question is answered. So
sure.
And hopefully your worship, by way of partially answering that question, some of these goals, some of the actions that are put forward in the master list of actions where you see 21.5 FTEs, these are aspirational goals. These are things that would follow the 25 actions, some of which are already in progress. Some of these actions that are identified in here are underway by the departments. They've been collated. So we're already doing a number of these actions. We haven't looked at them through that lens. I'd also, sorry, I'd like to fix my microphone. I'd also like to say that we're not trying to accomplish everything at once. It would be completely unrealistic to come to council and say we need 21.5 people and $4 million next year to accomplish all these goals. That we couldn't do that even if we had all those people, because it's simply not realistic. This is intended to be.
Sure, but even with a long-term plan, which equates to about 28 years, that's averaging out at like a 1.75 tax increase per year.
And some of those issues, Councillor McMath, some of them, as I say, are already in progress. Some of them will not be done because they'll be modified. This is a starting point. This isn't the plan that we're looking at.
But it is the plan. It's the draft plan. And the other piece to that as well is I would love for us to start some of these pieces now. I don't want this to be a report that we take and we shelve and it kind of gets lost in translation. Like there is a lot of hard work and hours that you can see and some serious education at the table. And so it's just,
Okay, Councilor McMath, we're going to deal with
Sure,
that.
I'll wait till it hits the floor and then I'll continue.
Come back to you. I just want questions right now. They're good questions. And then we'll get to the motion. So Councilor Logan.
I can actually help answer some of the previous question. 2 of the items with $4 signs, the largest amount of money in the 25 items are implementing the TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, and implementing the Parks and Trails Master Plan.
Okay, now I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but I see Ms. Gray and she's our financial officer. So I'm going to give her the floor.
Thank you. I just want to clarify one thing on the staffing piece. The intent wasn't that we needed 22 or 21 and a half new staff members to implement this plan. It was just trying to highlight that this will either with current staff or potential new staff, like we don't know this at the time, but there will be staff time needed, resources needed to do that. That's not to say that current staff don't have the capacity to add this into their current jobs. We have vacancies that other jobs here could be looked at. So I just wanted to clarify that this wasn't necessarily saying 21 new FTEs to implement this plan. There potentially may be a few new staff that may be needed once we get into the weeds of the plan, but there is the thought that current staff can take on some of these shorter term items because we're already doing many of these things. So it's just going to be a matter of tracking and reporting it back out. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Okay, I would like to limit the questions to Ms. Carsfield, and then we will have a debate when we do the motions. So is there any other questions for Ms. Carsfield? I think Councillor St. Pierre was another go at it. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
I had a question about, there was some mention in the appendices about, I forget the name of the exact program organization, wildlife. And it's one of my concerns in terms of the equity lens. If someone actually wants to plant a garden to increase their food security, it might take them a couple of packets of seeds. They might start a compost pile. They can actually start something in a fairly small patch of ground, and they can have some food security. There's, however, a problem in that we have deer running rampant in Souk. And if people wanted to plant a fruit tree, they could potentially do that, but then it's a bear attractant. And I guess my question is really around whether or not we're going to try and look at some sort of strategies around an equity lens to actually allow people to grow gardens and to actually plant fruit trees, while keeping in mind that there's a part of the community that really wants the deer to have a chance to travel throughout the community wherever they want, and for bears to be around too. But there is a problem around the equity there, because people can actually put up electric fences and fencing and have their yard. And if they have a big yard, they'll probably have a sunny patch. That is not the case with people that have less. They just can't. And they might need the food more. So I'd like to point that out. And
I don't know, can you answer that question? I'm not even sure it's a question. So
well, I was wondering if it was considered at all.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of talk about protecting the animals and keeping Souk wild. Is there some talk about actually allowing people to garden with the food security?
Yeah, so absolutely. The question of gardening and of community gardens and of access to food and access to growing food is definitely an important one that is at least partially included in the adaptation food security section of the appendices. As for specific programs to support that, I think it's an excellent idea to include them, and definitely if it's not been included up to this point, I recommend that it's included. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Welcome. And my next question was with regard to 15% parkland. Now with 15% parkland, was there some idea of, I guess I saw some about, shoreline and so on and so forth, but what are the thoughts in terms of strategies for actually being able to acquire 15% parkland? And is there some consideration of whether that might affect, for example, employment lands or the availability of land for the district to have affordable housing? Because I actually consider local economic development, affordable housing critical pieces of climate action, so we can reduce our GHG, so we can have a robust, resilient community. Those things have to happen. 15% additional parkland seems like a lot, but I'm curious, is there any plan?
Councillor St. Pierre, is the question 15%?
The question is how, and has there been some consideration of how that balances out with the other things that might be?
The consideration for how it would balance out with other land use considerations would come through in the draft 2022 OCP and how land use is advised for the whole of the district of Souk. A goal of 15% additional parkland was placed as a way to encourage acquiring new parkland specifically to protect wild spaces that may not be considered for development, or perhaps under the consideration of council should not be considered for development for other uses, and so then protecting them into the future. So it's a consideration of what kind of legacy is needed in terms of protecting different types of sensitive ecosystems, in particular as it collaborates with all the different types of land uses that there are in Sooke and absolutely are needed.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Bateman, and hopefully this is in the form of a question.
Yeah, I'll frame it as a question. So I'm looking at the motion here, and I really appreciate the conversation around staffing and money and tax impacts and all of that. What you're seeking from us tonight is endorsement of this climate action plan as a whole, in principle. And it will, if we do so, staff will then look at the 25 high impact recommendations and cost outs some of them. And my question is, which of the recommendations will you look at out of those 25, which the next council incidentally will be looking at when the 5-year budget is being discussed?
It is the intention of this plan and the way that it's been presented that all 25 actions will be presented as potential options for the next council and for the budget considerations in the fall.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Gray is always very realistic in terms of what she brings forward. So I imagine you will be prioritizing those.
I think you're a little ahead of yourself. We haven't passed anything yet, so there's nothing to prioritize yet.
Okay, I'm just getting clarity that we wouldn't be seeing a, okay, fine. I'll leave it.
Get direction from us.
Yeah.
Councillor McMath?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go
Hello.
ahead.
Okay, great. Who will be putting together the actual plan with the price tags attached to it? Who will be doing that work?
Ms. Gray is going to take that question.
Thank you. So if this plan and these 25 items are endorsed by council and supported by council, then as you see, most of the items are assigned to specific departments. So how staff envision implementing this or working through this would be part of the budget 2023 development that we're working on starting right now. This plan, the transportation master plan, the Parks and Trails master plan, the fire master plan, all of these master plans will be presented to various departments and as part of their 2023 to 2027 budget build, and even out further years. The conversations will happen between at all levels and come up with priorities that will be included for council's consideration for which year makes sense based on other priorities and other projects that are happening. So it'll happen with all departments, because this plan has to be implemented by all departments. Every department has a piece in it. So as we're going through that budget development process, this will naturally evolve to it and will be a response, or one of the items that will be presented to council of this item's being asked for because it ticks these 5 master plan boxes, or this is just climate, or this is just transportation, etc.
How will you know what Sooke can afford and what it can't afford through all those plans if you have no guidance on us over, let's say, just this action plan and council's priorities in this action plan?
Well, I guess it's similar to how we develop every year's budget. Like the transportation master plan has, tens of millions of dollars worth of costs in there. Realistically, we can't implement that in 5 years, much to the director of operations chagrin. But it's not achievable. So that's the job of staff. That's what staff are hired for, is to make recommendations and prioritize projects and use.
Well, I would just interject there. It's council's job to serve the community and be a conduit for the community's compass.
I'm going to jump in because I want to say something to the same effect. is that when council comes in, whether the new council, maybe we're all here again, they will set the priorities in their strategic plan, and they will give direction to staff of which ones of these items that they want to be actioned or costed. And then council will make those decisions of whether we can afford them or not. The council in the end will get the final say.
So why is there a recommendation for endorsement when there isn't a price tag attached?
Just a sec here. We'll get to the motion in a
Sorry,
minute.
that's a question.
Right now, I'm just dealing with questions. And then when we get to the motions, then we can make the statements, because I have a whole bunch myself and I've been holding back, which is very difficult for me.
Sure. So my question is, why is...
We will get to that, Councilor McMath, and you will certainly get to
So
say.
sorry, we're just in the question period. So my question is, why is there a recommendation for the endorsement of a plan when we have not listed our priorities or a price tag to the pieces?
I understand that it's in principle, not the endorsement of the plan. It's the second half of that which gets down to the weeds. And I'm going to make a suggestion very shortly, at a prerogative of the chair. But I just want to know if there's any more questions, the Carousel. Then we can deal with that other question. All right, I assume we're done with the questioning now. I'm going to call for a bathroom break, because usually I have them at 20 after. And then I have a prerogative of the chair, which I'm going to exercise. In fact, I'll exercise the prerogative of the chair now. If I could have the motion up on the screen again, please. I've listened to the discussion, and there's really two motions in here. And that, the committee of the whole recommend council receive the draft climate action plan for endorsement in principle. That is one question. And the other one is that the committee of the whole recommend council direct administration to include the recommendations in this plan for consideration in a 5-year financial plan with the goal of aligning with the present and future needs of District Sioux. I think those are two distinct questions, and I'd like to separate them and have a separate vote on them. But I will need council's permission to do that. If somebody were willing to make that motion that we separate, and we'll take a vote on that. Go ahead.
These are recommended motions. They're not motions that are on the floor. So we can bring up any motions we want, whether it's these or other motions that aren't anything to do with these. So I think if we're going to make a motion, it would be read out what you want, whether it's on the screen or not, and make that motion.
I believe I just did, but maybe not. I'll make the motion then. Yeah, okay, that's maybe a little bit clearer. I did check with our corporate officer today, and I have the prerogative of the chair to make that motion. So I will make that motion, and then we don't even need a seconder for it. So is there any discussion to the motion?
Can you please read the motion aloud?
Oh, okay, the idea is we're going to split this. There's going to be two motions that the committee of the whole recommend council receive the draft suit 2030 climate action plan for endorsement in principle. Question 1. Then we'll have a second vote that the committee of the whole recommend council direct administration to include the recommendations in this plan for consideration in a 5-year financial plan with the goal of aligning it with the present and future needs of the District of Sioux. So we're splitting it in half at the word "and." Go ahead, Councillor Williams.
So for clarity, you're making both of these motions.
Yes,
Okay.
your separate motions.
We need to have one motion on the floor at a time.
Okay, well, we'll get this done one form or another. So
That's procedurally, we can only have one motion.
I'll go to our corporate officer.
Sorry, yeah, so I think Deputy Mayor Beddoes was reading aloud the resolution as presented in the report. And then as the chair, he can ask for them to be split apart. So I think that's in effect what he has done. So it was, sorry.
Right, sorry,
I
that
think-
takes away the power of council to make a motion. Right, so if council wants to make these motions, we can make them separately. I agree with you. And I hear what staff is saying.
I don't mind having two votes if that's what it takes. But the first thing is that I want to split off that the committee of the whole recommend council receive the draft SUIT 2030 climate action plan for endorsement in principle. Motion one. I make that motion. Okay, we don't need a seconder. Okay, any discussion to that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Go ahead, Councilor McMahon.
So I just want clarity as to why the words endorsement in principle versus receive for info are in this motion.
This was what was presented to us by staff. And
Okay, so then through the chair to staff.
I'm making, and so that my motion is in principle.
So in my opinion, endorsement should not be in the motion. I love many facets of this plan, but I can't in good conscience endorse it. Like the verbiage is what I'm struggling with. It's not that like I'm against this plan or anything like that. It's just that I have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers. And so I can't say that I endorse this plan when there's no price tag associated with it. So I would prefer that it say for receive for info. So right now I don't support this motion, and it's for that reason.
I don't have a problem not supporting the motion, but that is the motion. If the council does not like that motion and votes it down, then we will take another motion. But right
I
now,
understand. That's why I had asked in the question period why the words endorsement were in the motion. So now that question can't be answered.
okay, Councilor St. Pierre.
The reason for the language endorsement is that so that staff at a later stage can actually take those 25 recommendations, and in a similar way to the way they took the work plan from the previous Climate Action Committee, costed them out. It came back to council. We decided whether or not we liked it. It turned out that a bunch of this stuff was already being done. The rest of it could actually be included in the 5-year financials, and it wasn't actually any huge impact at all. I don't think we actually had a tax increase that year, so that was pretty good. Unless we actually get staff to go through the recommendations and cost them out, we simply don't know. We don't know what their capacities are in terms of time to accomplish the tasks, what grants are available, what are the resources available. They need the time to go through that, and they're not going to spend the time going through that unless we endorse it, because otherwise they're wasting their time. So we have to endorse it first so they can actually go through the process of costing it out so we can determine whether or not we're going to accept that cost during budgeting.
So we don't need the words endorsement because the second motion that's on the board directs staff to do exactly what you just mentioned, which is what I'm looking for. So the first motion is stating essentially that council supports this plan in the entirety. And so I'm struggling with that verbiage.
Councilor McMath, other councils may have the same problem. That's why when it comes to a vote, they can exercise their ability as well. If they don't like it the way it's written, then they can defeat it. Councilor Lovins.
Yeah, I'm just a bit shocked that this is a discussion of council around the word endorsement. This is what we do with all of our plans. We have an age-friendly plan, an accessibility including report, agricultural plan, childcare needs assessment, community ec dev plan, community energy emissions plan, strategic plan. I will stop there, but we have tons of plans in our district and none of them have everything costed out. That is what our financial plan, which is another plan of the district, is for. And so every year we go through that 5-year financial plan and update it based on the priorities that council sets. And it's something we do every single year. So I don't know why this is all of a sudden new. Endorsing this in principle is very clear to me that we will give staff the ability to move ahead, looking at the possibilities of what can be done in these 25 action plans within the budget. And just like the last budget process where they came back to us with, I think, over 17% tax increase, we will go through it as council and say, no, we don't want that. No, we don't want that. Yes, we want this. And we'll reduce the tax increase to accommodate the needs of our community. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
Hey, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I'd just like some clarity. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Loggins. Will this come to us at the next council meeting, next Monday night? Or will it be coming through in September, I think?
That I
saw on your timeline.
Ms. Machado?
Sorry, the recommendations from the committee of the whole would come forward at the next meeting on July 25th for consent adoption.
Any other comments on the motion? So I guess we're going to be voting on this motion. Councillor St. Pierre.
Yeah, so this is a slightly larger comment and just, I guess it's been moved. So I'm going to motivate, or I'm going to talk about that piece of it. I think that it's interesting that in this particular case, the plan is mostly about connections, and it's about actually making people in our community happier. It's about having better homes. It's about having more jobs. It's about having a better environment in terms of trees and amenities and so on and so forth. It's about less commuting. Let's be honest, a lot of the elements of our society right now kind of suck. We have to work awfully hard for a roof over our heads. It's not affordable. We have to commute to get to work. There's a lot of things that we would like to do differently. This plan is about actually changing some of those values. When I hear changing culture, I hear we don't want to commute anymore and we'd like to work closer to home and we want more parties in the park. And I think that most of us can actually agree with that. And at the same time, we can reduce emissions. To the people who think, okay, maybe climate change is not happening. Well, the worst case scenario is we get a better community out of it. That is not the worst possibility. But right now, the statistics and the data are in, and it looks like a long shot that it's not actually happening, that we don't actually have some fairly bad possibilities. You can all make some changes. So I say we put the money on the solid, and the solid worst case scenario, we get a better community with better homes, which costs less to run. Ideally, we have affordable housing for the people who can't afford to get their own heat pumps, because I think we need to focus on that. I think that's something I was actually hoping to see more of in the climate plan, which was affordable housing and more emphasis on local economic development. But I think we can push that in the future. That's certainly indicated in the plan. I think it's a no-brainer that this is just a good thing to do for us, and that's kind of change that we need, period.
Okay, I'm going to go with Councillor Lajeunesse because he hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, I was struggling with the word endorsement as well, because I think having read through the document, there are many things in there that we're already doing as a municipality. There's some things that are being added on, and I'm very curious to see what the actual cost of implementing this plan will be. And I think that one of the things that I would like to see more of in there is education. I think if we decide to move forward with this plan, it'll have the same sort of effect on the community as the province announcing a $1 billion museum replacement. People are not going to enjoy hearing about 10% per year tax increase. So I think education is the key. We need to change the way people think and the way they do things. I have no doubt that human activity has accelerated climate change and is continuing to accelerate climate change, and that we do need to act. But I think we as a district are already doing much of what this plan is suggesting. So I'd like to see the cost breakdown. But as far as this first motion, I'm willing to support it at this point.
Hey, any other councillor? Councillor Bateman.
Is this the time for extended comments, or shall I wait for the motion? Oh, the motion is on the floor. Okay. Well, I'm just looking up in principle as a general, this is a quote, as a general idea or plan, although the details are not yet established or clear. I.e. the government agreed in principle to a peace plan that included a ceasefire. So in principle does not require hard and fast details. I think it's important to remember what Ms. Carlsfeld told us at the outset. This is a starter. This is the district. I look over at our council strategic plan, long-term planning, number 2, environmental leadership. We had in the action plan something in the order of 18 different items under climate action. This climate action plan encompasses all of them. So that was our 4-year plan, and it'd be nice to achieve. Maybe we're not going to achieve the OCP, which was one of those adopt an OCP. We're not going to be adopting a climate action plan either. This will be entirely contingent on the budget planning process. You know how intensely we debated various items in years past. As I said earlier, this council, theoretically will not be around to have that debate. And I'm sure climate will be a campaign issue. But I think it is important to remember that we as a council, minus Councillor Lajeunesse and with Councillor Parkinson, made a commitment to bold climate action leadership. And this plan, so again, back to in principle. Tonight, this committee of the whole is recommending to council, when we sit as council, that we're endorsing it in principle. And next week, it can be totally torn apart and brought back to a different status. But I'll be supporting this motion.
Councillor McMahon.
Councillor St. Pierre was commenting on affordable housing, and I believe it was Mr. Anderson that spoke to not forgetting about the poor people, but I would just touch on it. I don't think it's the poor people. I think it's the average person. We have just come through a pandemic. Gas prices are increasing, food costs are rising, people's interest rates have jumped, and they're going to continue to jump. And so the challenge that I have with a project of this scope, with what is roughly $4.5 million price tag to it, it's not that I don't support the idea and lots of these actions in there. This is that I can't, like in good conscience, support this without being able to say when I see my neighbor in the grocery store, because they're not going to understand the minutia of in principle. They're going to say, how could you approve a $4.5 million plan when like I'm like struggling here. And so it's a kind of the challenge that I'm having with this is the same challenge that I'm having with the OCP, where it's, I would like to see the price tags before we make the choices. You want to go buy a house, you look at a mansion. If they're like, hey, you want it? Of course I do, but can I afford it? And so that's the reality that I want our choices to be grounded in. And I think it's council that should be directing what that looks like. Because of course, if you put a picture that's perfect in front of someone with no price tag on it, of course they want it. But if the community knew the financial implications, a lot of their choices would be changed. And again, I'm not against this. The idea of us working together for a climate action plan, it's that this in particular with no dollar sign attached is what I'm struggling with. And so I can't endorse it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor McMath. Now, I guess lastly, I get the comment. And there's a reason why I split this, and it's I felt that it was necessary. I don't see the danger of endorsing it in principle, because that's what it means. The heavy lifting comes with the next council. And they're the ones that are going to have to prioritize. And when we get to the next motion, I'm really reluctant to hamstring our staff when it is going to be the next council that sets the priorities. And the next council will be able to look at this draft in principle, this endorsement in principle, pick out those things that they feel that want to be moved ahead and ask staff to cost those out. But it will be council's decision as to what gets picked out. So that's why I wanted, first of all, that if we are happy with the plan, I know there's could be some wordsmithing, but it is in principle. There's nothing there that locks us into anything. And then the nitty gritty comes with the second motion, which we're going to entertain after we have a break. So anyways, I do not have a problem with the way it's worded. I don't think it locks us into anything. I'm very much aware of the budgeting process and how council sets their priorities, and the new council won't be us. Well, we may be us, hopefully some of us. They will set those priorities. They will pick off those things from this document and saying, staff, this is what we're interested in doing. Give us a dollar value. And if it comes back to a 17% tax rate, guess what? It's not going to happen. So, I mean, that is our job as council when it comes up to it. So right now we have a committee that's worked very hard in putting this together. I don't agree with everything in it, but believe me, but in principle, I don't think we're in risk any danger. And guess what? It's a fluid situation. What we're doing next year could be totally different than what we're doing this year. So I will support the motion. And with that, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Councilor McMath, how are you voting, please?
Against.
Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1 against. So that motion has passed. Now I'll use my other prerogative as chair is to have a bathroom break or a break and go outside. We can't smoke, but at least you can pretend. So, okay, thank you.
What time are you?
5 minutes. Okay, can I have everybody take their seats, please? We'll get through it, Jeff. Oh, I don't know. I'm ready for tomorrow too. Okay. We'll call it back in motion here. Okay, now, as I spent them, I guess it's only right that I make the next motion. And the next motion is that implementation and prioritization of the climate action plan be left to the new council. New council during orientation for their consideration. I'll reread that. That the committee of the whole recommend council refer the implementation plan to staff for presentation to the new council during the orientation for their consideration. So they're the ones that are going to be making the decisions, not us. That is the motion. It's on the screen. Councilor McMath, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so through you to staff, the first reveal of the new budget, when do you plan to do that? Would that be in mid to late November for the new council?
Through the chair, December, maybe. We'll kind of timings to be confirmed at this stage, but the plan is to, as you know, the budget's already disclosed, gather all those results, work on some planning over the next few months and be able to hit the ground running with new council. But as has been pointed out, we need to hear what council's priorities are going to be first before finalizing a budget.
Go ahead.
A quick follow-up to you, Ms. Gray. So the new local government climate action funding of 135,000, will that be part of your budget considerations that you'll be thinking about over the next 3-4 months?
Through the chair, for sure. And the established funding already in the budget for climate action. Those are sources, as well as other grants will be explored in the coming months as action items have been identified here.
Yeah, go ahead. What's the point of order?
I'm just curious, are we asking questions about a motion that hasn't, is this motion on the floor? Have you put this motion on the floor?
I made the motion.
Okay, the motion is made. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor St. Pierre, go ahead.
I have concerns over the budgeting considerations. My understanding is that the budgeting process is already started or will be starting very shortly, obviously well before the election, well before there's another council. I would assume that it's easier for you to actually start costing some of this stuff out as everything else is being costed out, given that there's some overlap, given that you'll be doing some of the similar work anyway, but I don't know this for a fact. Will the work take longer and take more time if you wait to present to a new council, or is it preferable in terms of saving on time, staff time and resources to start it now with something more similar to the previous recommended resolution?
Through the chair to Council St. Pierre. I think as part, like staff have seen this plan, knowing if council's supportive of endorsing the plan in principle, this will just be part of the review process. I appreciate council can prioritize and change direction in October. And we may not have the bigger ticket items fully costed out, but definitely some of the smaller quick win items that are already occurring, we're just going to be making note of so that we can, when we do report back to council on initial orientation, say out of these 25 items, 12 already in progress with current action staff are doing, and these other 12, we're waiting council direction to cost out more fulsomely. Obviously staff will try to get as detailed costing as we can, but depending on the bigger ticket items, that will be potentially take a little bit more time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments or discussions? It sounded too easy. Okay.
It is.
Oh, Councilor McMath, I see your hands up. Go ahead, Councilor McMath.
I just had a question. When it comes to the budget presentations that staff will make, what is that going to look like? Will that council be going through each of these plans in one budget session? Or are you going to break it down into meetings?
Through the chair to Councilor McMath, it hasn't been determined yet what the orientation and budget planning will look like. It will partly depend on the makeup of new council, because if it's majority returning members, then we can start at a different standpoint with just general information on how budgeting works. If it's a majority of new council, then we'll have to take a lot more time and a lot more meetings to just get into each step of the budget development process.
Okay, thank you. And with the staff resources that you have now, how much of this plan do you anticipate having a dollar figure attached to for the action items by November?
Through the chair to Councilor McMath, I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know for sure at this time. I'll hopefully know a little bit more by end of September. There's one more council meeting and October 3rd council meeting. So between now and then, as some budget department conversations are occurring, staff can try and look at the list and determine if there's some quick wins that we can quickly report back on, saying these ones have been achieved and these are the remaining ones, and provide a bit more direction to council at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other councillor wish to speak on this? If not, then I'll call for the question. I'll read it out one more time, that the committee of the whole recommend council refer the implementation of the climate action plan to staff for presentation to the new council during the orientation for their consideration. That is the motion. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, myself. All those against?
Myself, and it's just back to that price tag premise.
So that's a yes, Councillor McMath?
That's a no.
No, thank you. Okay, that is passed. Thank you very much. New business. Hearing none. Motion to adjourn. Oh, some Councillor St. Pierre, don't need a seconder. All those in favor? Toot. How'd you vote for that, Councillor McMath?
In favor.
I know you are, just giving you a hard time.